The idea for a treehouse came to him during a casual conversation. Michael and Karen Johnson, newcomers to Westwood, were excited about the move. The small rural town seemed like the perfect place to raise their two children, Emily, 8, and Thomas, 10. The lot they had purchased was large, with a stunning view and a century-old tree right in the middle of the yard. "Perfect for a treehouse," Michael commented. Wasting no time, he began designing the structure. For weeks, Michael worked tirelessly, even after long hours at the office. He wanted this treehouse to be special, something his children would cherish forever. The treehouse was sturdy, with branches that seemed tailor-made to support the weight of the structure. Little by little, the construction took shape. Sturdy wooden walls, small windows, and a makeshift ladder made from pieces of rope and planks. When it was finished, the treehouse became the children's favorite retreat. Emily and Thomas spent hours there, decorating it with drawings, fairy lights, and small toys. Karen loved watching them through the kitchen window, laughing and playing. But after a few weeks, Emily began to complain about something strange. "Mommy, I heard someone calling me last night," she said as she helped Karen wash the dishes. Karen frowned. "It must have been the wind, honey. Those old trees make funny noises." Emily seemed satisfied with the explanation, but over the next few days, the complaints became more frequent. Thomas, for his part, began to avoid the treehouse. When asked, he would simply say that he didn't like the way it felt up there. One night, Michael woke up to Emily crying. He ran to her room and found her shaking. "What happened?" "I saw someone in the treehouse window. They were watching me," the girl whispered. Michael tried to reassure her, but then decided to investigate. He grabbed a flashlight and went out into the backyard. It was completely silent. When he shined it into the treehouse, he saw nothing but the children's toys. He climbed the ladder, checked inside, and then climbed back down. Just as he was about to return home, he felt something scratch his arm. He looked quickly but saw nothing around him. Inside the house, he noticed 3 thin cuts on his arm, as if they were claw marks. Karen, increasingly concerned, suggested that the children stop playing in the treehouse until they figured out what was going on. Michael agreed, but Emily insisted that she wanted to play there again. "It's my favorite place," she said. Her parents reluctantly allowed her to go up there, but on the condition that she could only go up there during the day. The next afternoon, while Karen was gardening and Michael was still at work, Emily disappeared. It was just like any other afternoon, and the children were playing in the backyard. When Michael got home, he asked where Emily was. Karen, distracted by her plants, told him that she must be in the treehouse. Michael ran up there. When he went up, he found only his daughter's favorite teddy bear abandoned in the corner. Karen immediately called the police, and a search of the entire area was conducted. Helicopters, sniffer dogs, volunteers, they all mobilized, but Emily was never found. Thomas, traumatized, refused to talk about what happened that day. He barely left his room and spent most of his time drawing. One morning, he handed his father a drawing. It was of a shadowy figure with empty eyes, peering out of the window of the treehouse. "That was him," Thomas said before returning to his room. Michael and Karen sold the house a few weeks later. They could no longer live there, surrounded by memories of what they had lost. The new owner cut down the tree, but even so, locals say that on windy nights, they can hear whispers coming from that direction. Jenna had always been fascinated by the mysteries of the small town where she lived. Out of her group of friends, she was the one who most enjoyed hearing stories about abandoned places and unexplained events. When she heard about the woods behind the school, her interest was immediate. Ever since she was a child, Jenna had known that the locals avoided that area. There were signs posted on the trees, as if the woods themselves were some kind of taboo. "Never go there," the older ones would say. "Some things are better left forgotten." Her friends, Kyle and Mia, shared the same curiosity, although with less enthusiasm. The trio were inseparable, and it wasn't hard for Jenna to convince them to explore the woods. One Friday afternoon, after school, they met at the point where the school fence met the edge of the woods. The fence was broken, with an opening large enough for the three of them to squeeze through. The woods seemed much denser than they had imagined. The trunks were tall and twisted, and the sunlight barely filtered through the canopy. Jenna led the way, while Kyle and Mia followed close behind. The sound of leaves crunching beneath their feet seemed to echo, breaking the eerie silence. After walking for almost an hour, something caught Jenna's eye. "Over there." She pointed up, where a wooden structure was almost hidden among the branches. It was an old treehouse, so worn down by time that it seemed a miracle it was still standing. The makeshift ladder, made of planks nailed to the trunk, looked ready to collapse at any moment. "Do you think it's safe to climb up?" Mia asked, visibly nervous. "Only one way to find out," Kyle replied with a defiant smile. Jenna was the first to climb. The planks creaked beneath her feet, but they held. Up there, the space was small and dark. The wood was covered in moss, and the smell of damp was strong. Kyle and Mia soon joined her. In the center of the house was a doll made of straw, surrounded by melted candles. Jenna crouched down to take a closer look. Engraved on the walls were strange symbols, as if someone had spent hours carving them. "What a weird place," Kyle said, trying to break the tension. He picked up the doll and began shaking it like a toy, mocking the situation. "Stop it!" Mia shouted. "Don't touch things." Kyle laughed, but stopped. That was when they heard it. A low laugh, almost a whisper, echoed through the woods. Jenna froze. "Did you hear that?" Mia grabbed her arm. That was the wind, right?" "It wasn't the wind," Kyle said, visibly uncomfortable. They decided to go down immediately. Kyle went first, followed by Jenna. As Mia started to climb down, she let out a scream. She fell to the ground, clutching her ankle. Jenna ran to her. "What happened?" "Something grabbed me," Mia said, crying. "I swear, something pulled my foot." Jenna looked at her friend's ankle and saw red marks shaped like fingers. Kyle, who was always joking about everything, now looked serious. He helped Mia up, and the three of them ran back through the woods without looking back. But that was just the beginning. That night, as Jenna tried to sleep, she heard footsteps outside her window. She lived on the second floor, so it was impossible for anyone to be walking there. When she looked, she saw no one, but she did notice that the straw doll they had left in the treehouse was now on the windowsill. The next morning, Kyle showed up at school with dark circles under his eyes. He said he had been having nightmares all night. "I was trapped in that treehouse, and something was scratching at me. I couldn't get out, no matter how hard I tried." Mia, on the other hand, seemed distant. When Jenna tried to talk to her, Mia just said, "I think it followed me." Everyone's behavior began to change. Kyle became increasingly aggressive, losing his temper over small things. Mia seemed listless, almost as if she were in a trance. And Jenna began waking up every night at the same time, always at 3 a.m., with the feeling that she was being watched. It all culminated one night when Kyle disappeared. Jenna and Mia tried to call him, but the phone kept going to voicemail. When they went to his house, his parents were frantic. He was nowhere to be found, and no one knew what had happened. Days later, Jenna found something in front of her house. one of the melted candles from the treehouse, with Kyle's name engraved on it. She knew she had to do something, but she was afraid to go back to the woods. Despite this, she decided to face her fear. Mia, however, refused to go with her. "I'm not going back there. Ever." Jenna went alone. When she got to the treehouse, she found a small pile of objects on the ground. The straw doll, another candle, and something that made her heart stop, the watch Kyle wore. She doesn't remember how she got out of the woods, but she was never the same after that day. Kyle was never found, and Jenna avoided talking about what she saw in the treehouse. Mia moved away from the city months later, trying to escape the memories. The woods have been fenced off, but residents say they can still sometimes hear laughter and footsteps coming from there, especially at nightfall. When Sophia moved in with her grandparents, she was relieved to finally leave the big city. After the accident that took her parents' lives, all she wanted was peace. The cozy atmosphere of the country house seemed perfect for a fresh start. The house sat on a hill surrounded by trees, with a flower garden and a stunning view. But what caught her attention most was the old treehouse in the backyard. "Your father and uncles used to play there when they were little," her grandmother said with a wistful smile. "It's a little old now, but it's still safe." Sophia was intrigued. Ever since she arrived, she had felt a strange sensation every time she looked at the structure. It was as if the treehouse had a presence of its own. Unlike the rest of the property, which seemed alive and vibrant, the treehouse had an aura of abandonment. The first night, Sophia woke with a start. She heard children's laughter coming from outside. She peeked out the window, but all was quiet. The trees swayed gently in the wind, and there was no sign of anyone. Thinking it was a dream, she went back to sleep. Over the next few days, the laughter became more frequent. Sophia finally mentioned it to her grandparents over breakfast. "I think I heard children playing in the yard at night." The two looked at each other before her grandmother answered. "It must be the wind, dear. These old trees make strange noises." But Sophia didn't believe it. She was sure there was something more. Determined to find out the truth, she climbed up to the treehouse during the day. The interior was dusty, but there were signs of use: a folded blanket in the corner, small toys scattered on the floor, and drawings pinned to the walls. Sophia examined the drawings. They were made with crayons, showing children playing in what appeared to be the same yard where she was now. However, one detail in the drawings bothered her. There was always a dark figure in the background, hidden among the trees, watching the children. Sophia felt a chill and decided to go down. That night, she was woken up again by the laughter. This time, it was louder, almost as if it were coming from inside her own house. Gathering her courage, she walked down the stairs toward the backyard. When she reached the door, she stopped. The laughter stopped abruptly. Everything was silent, except for the sound of something scratching against the wood of the house. The next day, Sophia tried to talk to her grandfather about what she had heard and seen in the treehouse. He sighed deeply before answering. "I think it's time you knew," he said. According to him, decades ago, several children in the neighborhood mysteriously disappeared. They all had one thing in common: they were seen playing in the treehouse before they disappeared. The case was never solved, but the residents believed that something evil was connected to the structure. Despite this, Sophia's family never had the courage to destroy it. From that day on, things started to get worse. Sophia started finding toys in the yard, even after she was sure no one was around. One night, when she looked in the bathroom mirror, she saw a pale-looking figure with sunken eyes behind her. When she turned around, there was nothing there. One morning, she found small handprints on the walls outside her window, as if children had tried to get in. Despite scrubbing the marks as hard as she could, They were back the next morning, always in the same place. One particular incident shook Sophia deeply. She was sitting on the swing in the yard, looking up at the treehouse, when she heard a whisper, "Come play with us." She looked around, but saw no one. When she looked back at the treehouse, she saw several small figures peering out of the windows. Their faces were pale, almost translucent, with empty eyes that seemed to stare right through her. She ran inside the house, locking all the doors and windows. When she told her grandparents what she had seen, her grandmother burst into tears. Her grandfather, in turn, decided it was time to put an end to it. The next day, he hired a crew to cut down the tree and dismantle the house. However, when the workers arrived, something inexplicable happened. The saws broke upon contact with a tree trunk, as if it were made of iron. The house remained intact, and the terrified workers refused to return. Not knowing what else to do, the family tried to ignore the presence of the treehouse. Sophia, however, continued to be tormented by visions and sounds. One day, she found a note on the floor of her bedroom. The message was written in childish handwriting. "Why don't you come play with us?" In despair, Sophia begged her grandparents to move out. Although reluctant, they agreed, and the family left the house weeks later. Despite the move, Sophia was never able to completely escape the memories of that treehouse. Years later, while researching disappearances in the area, she discovered a disturbing fact. All the children who had disappeared decades ago had the same description of the appearance of the figures she saw in the treehouse. The only difference was that their faces in the records were full of life, while the ones she saw were empty and soulless. Today, the property is abandoned, but locals say the treehouse is still there, untouched by time. Some swear they hear children's laughter coming from that direction, especially on nights with a full moon.